So, welcome back to a very special episode. It is The Legend of Zelda's 30th anniversary, or should I say, the Hyrule Fantasy, which was released a few days ago in Japan 30 years ago. Now, the Japanese got the Disk System game, and we got The Legend of Zelda. Now, there's so much to talk about, I can't wait to get into it. I just want to talk about the very first Legend of Zelda. This game meant so much to me. Out of all of the Zelda games that exist, this is my favorite Zelda game. It is the first one I experienced. It had a major impact on me. It still does. It was so awesome before I began doing this episode. I started playing the game again and I was capturing a lot of footage, and this game holds up extremely well after 30 years. If you've never played it, and I know there's some of you out there that have never played the very first Legend of Zelda, please give it a go. It really holds up the testament of time. It is a fantastic game. It is interesting to think there was a time with no Zelda. That time existed. I existed in that time. And I gotta tell you, my first experiences seeing Zelda and what I initially thought, like, for me and Andrew, we were video gamers. We loved playing video games. He had a computer down the road. We had the Nintendo. We were enjoying it. We went down the street one day to visit a friend of ours. His name was Michael Hole, and he was a guy in the neighborhood who also was getting a lot of everything from his parents, which was great. So we went over there one day, and we saw this. This is funny. We walk in, and we walk into his bedroom, and this was like on a table, The Legend of Zelda, and we're like, what the hell is this? And we're like, a gold cartridge? What the fuck? And we opened it up, and the cart, here we go. The cart was gold as well. We're like, what? The packaging is gold. The cartridge is gold. This must mean it's special. And little did we know how special it was, but not at first. We started trying to play the game. I remember Andrew sitting down trying to play it, and I think Mike didn't know how to play the game either. He had no idea. He's like, oh yeah, you just kind of go and fight things and blah blah blah. And he was giving us a really crappy explanation how to play The Legend of Zelda. And we're like, okay. And I was kind of used to Mario Brothers at that point. I was still really a console noob. I really was, especially to this new console, the NES. So I didn't understand The Legend of Zelda. I'm like, oh, the screens like go up, and is that another level that you have to defeat that level to go into the next? I was still thinking in the idea of Mario Brothers. I didn't understand this kind of open world environment. I didn't get it. And Andrew, I think he had more of an idea about it than me, but we both kind of walked away scratching our heads. But we were interested in the concept, but we never thought about it again. But there was so many advertisements for The Legend of Zelda on TV that we're like, wow, Nintendo's really pushing this. There must be something about it. But it didn't really hit me. It wasn't until I went to my friend, and this guy's become a little bit famous on the show as well. His name is Jeff. His dad, his parents are divorced. His parents were just, giving him everything. I mean, like the wizard, that kid in The Wizard who had every game, and the Power Glove. He was him. He was exactly him. The best, Converse shoes at the time, and crazy mountain bikes and all this kinds of stuff. So I went to visit him, and this is the guy who ripped me off for the Nintendo games. So that's the guy. He's famous for that reason, which is kind of funny. But I went over to visit his place one day in like 1987 because I was friends with him in elementary school. And it's funny, I knock on the door and I just hear, come in. So I walk in, and his mom was, working for the day, and it's in the summer. So I walk in, and he had a huge living room, and he had an old CRT TV. And I've said it before, he had turned it inwards into the corner. So he had this like cool little corner, and he had all these pillows, and he had all his Nintendo games, and he had the Nintendo Player's Guide, and he was just sitting there playing this game, and and he had all this candy. I mean, it was when you're a young kid, I was so envious. I'm like, this guy is doing it right. I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing it right. And I was really automatically jealous of the good time he was having here. I always had to fight with my parents to get the TV and for the 1 or 2 games that I had. And this guy, he had like 20, 30 games. It was insane. So I said, oh, what are you playing? He's like, oh, The Legend of Zelda. And I'm like, oh, I think I've seen this before. And so I just sat down. next to him when he was a nice guy, and I watched him play the game, and he had this big map open up, and I was like, oh, there's a huge map to it, and all of a sudden I kind of got it. I was like, so this is the world, and you go around the world in an adventure kind of way, and go to different dungeons and get different items, and they allow you to go into other dungeons, and the more items you get, the better, the more powerful you become, the more money you get, the more items you can buy. And I just was like, it was during this time, 87 and 88, the whole fantasy genre of role-playing games and Dungeons and Dragons just clicked with me. And it wasn't just kind of like something I was like, this is kind of cool. It was the most important thing in my life. I was like, this is what I want to do. And I was floored that day. I was taken back, and I had all of a sudden seen a whole different genre of video gaming. I was like, I didn't even know like RPGs in the system. I didn't play Phantasy Star till like a year later, like 6-7 months later. So Zelda was like it was an action RPG-ish kind of adventure game, puzzle game. I was just taken back by the whole thing, really. And this little character called Link, I was just like, wow. And I just went away from that, and I didn't get my copy. I borrowed a copy quite a bit of time later. I was always watching my friend Andrew. Andrew got it. Andrew, as I said that day, he didn't quite understand it, but he got it a little bit more than me. And he got the game. He's like, I'm fucking doing this. And I went over and I watched him fight the first bosses and do the dungeons. And it's funny, the dungeon theme will always remind me of Andrew's basement, watching him playing it and how mysterious and eerie it was and how exciting it was. And what was cool about the game was it had a battery backup, so you could save your game and come back to it. I'd been playing Mario Brothers, so when you died, it was over. You had to start from the beginning again. Not with this one, because it was an adventure style game. So you needed to be able to save your game to, go back onto your quest later on. You couldn't do this game in one sitting. Later on, you could do it in one sitting, but not in the 80s. You're still trying to figure out how this game even played. And the other thing that really got me, this is a really big thing with me, my friends. We've always loved it. The instruction manual. Of all things, back then, the instruction manual was gold as well, and it was incredible. It was really, I know this sounds so stupid, and I'm going to say it so many times, but it was mysterious. It was, because the world wasn't flooded with action RPGs. There was nothing like this. So you were really taking this in every single moment of it. And the instruction manual had these great little anime cutscenes that was kind of telling a story. And I was just getting into anime at the time. So I was like, is this an anime? Can I watch this in Japan? And I realized, no, I think they just created these still shots just to tell the story for the instruction manual. And I was like, wow, like the attention to detail there, it was quite impressive. And I always loved the instruction manual, the little super deformed Link, and there's something super charming about that. There really is, and that has to be mentioned as well. Finally, I think I borrowed my friend Andrew's copy after he finished the second quest in Zelda. I finally had Zelda at home, and man, I didn't have it memorized. So for me, it was starting the game brand new. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even have the Nintendo Player's Guide at that point. I didn't have that. I had this old map here, if you guys can remember that, and it's missing bits up here. The Nintendo Player's Guide fills them in, but at the time I was like trying to piece my way through the world and figure it all out, and it was really exciting, and I got a lot of memories. I know this is how old I am. A lot of memories on this crappy black and white television that I had. I didn't even have a color TV. I had this little black and white TV with RF on the back that I had in my room, and I would play it late at night, when my parents didn't know. It was like my awesome, exciting adventure, even on this crappy TV. And there I was, burning bushes, saying, is this gonna, unlock something? Well, is there something behind this? And that was the whole game. It was an exploration game. Going out, it wasn't all mapped with the internet the way it is now. So you could discover something that maybe somebody else had never discovered. It felt like that kind of game. It felt like your very, very own experience, and it was magical. It really was magical. I will always talk in these terms, especially for the early games, because there was nothing like it, and it really made a mark on me. And I finally got to the end of the game and I finished it after a long time. I mean, The Legend of Zelda took me a long time. I burned every single bush in that game by the time I had finished it, and it was an absolutely wonderful quest. I absolutely adored it. I love the character design. Like, years later, I end up with t-shirts like this and little figurines like this to capture the original Legend of Zelda. And let me tell you, all the sequels came out, and I love them. I've enjoyed them all in their own different ways, and I really have enjoyed the series as a whole. But I always come back to the original. I always come back to the original because it made such an impact in my youth, my innocent youth, just starting high school. It just was one of these types of games, and man, I cannot believe it's been 30 years. It makes me feel a little bit older, but I still can play this game and enjoy it the same way I did 30 years ago. And not a lot of games have that kind of power, and I started this off by saying, if you hadn't played the game, give it a try, go back to it. And man, I collected a few things over the years, like the original comics, that ran in Nintendo Power. This was a supplement to how cool the game was, that you could read about Link in Nintendo Power. That was really, really exciting. And another great book, The Legend of Zelda Hyrule Historia. This is a very excellent book on Zelda. And over the years, I picked up, Super Famicom re-releases on Game Boy Advance, and obviously, The Legend of Zelda here on Game Boy Advance. And it's also in the collection here. I try to get every version of Legend of Zelda, but it's always the gold box, isn't it? It's always the gold box we come back to. And what is one of my dream games? If somebody said, John, what is your dream game? What would you love? I would love a remake of The Legend of Zelda starring this Link. This one right here. And I've loved all the other Links, but this is my Link. This is the one that I grew up with. This is the first time I ever saw him. This is what he first looked like. We can't ever forget that. So, boy, guys, it's been so exciting to talk about The Legend of Zelda and look back on 30 years ago, and what an experience it was. And I gotta thank Nintendo for creating such an incredible adventure that I'm talking about 30 years later, a game that we all love, a game that we all really care about, and they're still making games for, and I can't wait to play all the new ones. So, anyways, guys, until next time.